Hi everyone, if you're looking for bonus content to go with this series, check out this episode where myself and my colleague Rebecca Laverty, Curator of History, have a behind the scenes chat about what went into developing this exhibition.
So Claire, how did the surfing exhibition come about in the Ulster Transport Museum?
So I'd always kind of wanted to do an exhibition on surfing. I'm not a surfer myself, unfortunately, but I have always been out in the water in some way with paddleboarding, and I also wanted to do something that was a bit more contemporary. Most of the collections you see on display in the Transport Museum are very historic, and I thought it would be great to do something that would maybe engage younger audiences, sort of 18 to 40 year olds, and I thought it would be really nice, especially as it happened whenever COVID had, when everything was locked down. A lot of people were doing more things out in the water. It ended up actually being quite perfect timing to sort of highlight how we engage with the water, and also highlight how important our seas are to us. So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, because you do have elements of the collection, I know, that are linked in, you know, maritime, and the sea is very much well represented in the collection, isn't it?
Yeah, we have a lot of vernacular boats in the collection, and some people would question maybe why we include surfing. Is this actually part of transport? But part of those vernacular boats are actually some rowing boats, which were used specifically just for racing. So we have vessels that weren't used for anything other than just to have fun in the water. So I think surfing has its place within the Transport Museum and the Transport Collection because of that.
And the Transport Collection speaks a lot to kind of pastimes in general, doesn't it? Like what was the way of life for people, and how they got about is linked into what were they doing in their spare time as well, you know, like surfing?
Yeah, 100%. One of the cars that we have in the collection was used just for racing, and I think it's really important to highlight those aspects of transport as much as just the everyday vehicles that we
like
use
trains.
for just for trains or anything that we just use to like commute to work. You know, transport goes beyond that, I think, and I hope that Celtic Wave kind of opens people's maybe minds a little bit more into what we can showcase at the Transport Museum.
So I have no idea how to curate an exhibition. What?
That's not true, Rebecca.
Come on, I'm a disembodied voice behind the camera. How did you approach this then? You had this idea, you wanted to go and do it, but how on earth did you think you were going to start to gather this?
Well, for the Celtic Wave, it was a little bit more difficult than other exhibitions I've approached because there really has hardly been anything written about surfing in Ireland and the history of it. So my approach was to actually interview the people who had started it all off and who continued to develop it throughout the decades. So
is this some of the people on the walls then that
yes,
we can see?
So we were very lucky. The late Alan Duke, he provided me with a lot of images, which was incredibly helpful, of some of the surfers in the early years. And through talking to them, and we travelled across Ireland interviewing, it was 25 people I think in total, and from their interviews that was how I was able to gain actually knowledge of the history and how it started off and what they did in the beginning with like making their own boards and making their own wetsuits, and sort of some of the stories associated with that, which were really funny.
Yeah, is this picture behind you then?
Yeah, this looks a little bit makeshift. I'm not really quite sure how the axe helped with how they built this, but
sure.
Maybe they knew what they were doing. But then one of the really interesting things that came out of it was talking to Bo Vance, who was one of the earlier surfers, and how they were the first in the world to use epoxy resin, which is how they make surfboards today. And Bo does say about he could have made his fortune, but oh well. But we were doing it here before they were doing it in America and Australia, which is incredibly innovative and something that I don't think maybe people are aware of, because as in so many things, if I find in transport, we punch above our weight in Northern Ireland and we don't really shout about it. So
we're not really, people don't always think of us as surfing, do you? It's like it's something associated with Australia and warm climates, not here.
Yes, exactly. I think sometimes when I've talked to people about doing this exhibition and say, oh, it's about surfing, and they're like, oh, is surfing big in Ireland? And I was like, yeah, it's really big, but I think it's like you said, you know, people just think surfing, they think Hawaii, California, Australia, and obviously it's really huge there, but it's a different type of surfing, I think, in Ireland. And I think it's almost like we've started to develop our own surfing culture here now as a result of that. You know, a lot of people will come to Ireland now because we do have the waves. They're maybe not as consistent in some of the other places in the world, but whenever we get the right conditions, some of the biggest waves in the world are here out in the west coast, and but even around Tramore, Waterford, Donegal, up around Portrush, you know, we've got really great spots for just your general everyday surfing, not just the big wave surfing. And I think it's become a real hotspot for people to try something a bit different with the cold water.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because both me and you grew up by the sea, and
Yes.
I think probably are very much exposed to that and aware of that. I know people who grew up saying that like the surfing was the best ever on the North Coast, sort of thing. So it's great to see a light being shone on that. So big wave surfing, what's
Big
that?
wave surfing. So big wave surfing is basically surfing any waves over 20 feet. So some of the big wave surfing people can paddle, but a lot of it now is the tow-in surfing, which is where they use a jet ski to tow the surfer in to make sure that they can get up to the speeds that are needed for these big waves because they're traveling so fast. So we interviewed two big wave surfers, Eski Britton, who's one of the first women in Europe to surf the big waves, but also Al Menny, who's up on the north coast. Al was extremely helpful, providing a lot of images and the GoPro footage that we have in our green screen jet ski in the background.
Tell us more about
Tell us
this.
about it. Yeah.
Whose idea was this?
It might have been mine.
Okay, take full credit, go on.
Yeah, we did a green screen interactive in our Museum of Innovation, and it actually was so popular that we decided to reproduce it for this exhibition. But it gives a little bit of an insight into how big wave surfing works with the tow-in aspect of it. So you can just see in the background, Al's attached to a rope, and the person on the jet ski will get up to the right speed, and whenever they're at the right point, Al will let go. And then the jet ski is also there as like a safety team. So if anything goes wrong or that the surfer needs to be collected, there's usually at least one, usually two jet skis that can come in and then pick them up. And that's what that board is at the back of the jet ski, is for them to climb on top of, so the jet ski can tow them out if there's any danger. Because obviously some of these waves are up to like 60, 70 feet. It's incredibly dangerous. And Al said himself that like he usually wears impact vests, and he usually wears 2 or 3 of them, because you can imagine a huge wall of water falling on top of you is incredibly dangerous, and you need to be able to, like, they have specialist training about breath holds so that you don't panic if you're kept under the water for 1 minute or longer. And also this is another object that we have on loan from Al, which was one of his helmets, and you can sort of see photos of him in the gallery wearing the orange helmet, but this is what he wore out in the west coast, and he actually had a really bad wipeout on it, and he's not sure whether his head hit the seabed or whether a board flew up in the air and cracked down on the back of his head, but either way this fiberglass helmet saved his life. So it just shows how dangerous that big wave surfing is.
And you can see the ways that you've been trying to kind of target that demographic of like 18 to 40, you know, that obviously I'm sure children would enjoy the jet ski, big kids also enjoy the jet ski. Is there anything else that you want to highlight in the gallery that you think is sort of speaking to that younger audience, like the use of the TV and the kind of oral history interviews? Is that also to target younger people?
I think what people really like to hear is people's stories, and rather than sort of taking the traditional approach with this, which we weren't able to do because there's hardly been anything written about the history of surfing here, having the surfers tell their stories in their own words, I think was a really important aspect of it, because they were very kind to let me have access to their community and to their stories and to share them with the museum. And so it was really important for me to be able to display those stories in an appropriate way and to really do justice to how important surfing is in Ireland. And also I hoped that maybe somebody might see this maybe some kid will come in and be thinking, I might want to try surfing. Maybe not the big wave surfing straight off, make that very clear, but if, you know, just even getting out into the waves and getting out into the water, I think it's really important to encourage that. So if this surfing exhibition might have helped a couple of people do that, then yeah, that's be really awesome.
And the interviews will be in the archive presumably as well, so then if anyone does want to continue the research that you've done here on surfing and kind of think about that more, they can do that in future years.
We keep all of our oral histories and video history in our archive so that people can access it if they are doing any further research. It would be fantastic if this developed into something else, and you know, people carried on with the research and beyond just this exhibition. And it's also, like, I wanted to include more stuff to try and engage younger people, and I hope that has come across, and I hope people have enjoyed it as something a little bit different from the usual exhibitions that we would have in the Transport Museum.
It does look a little bit different from our usual exhibitions as well, doesn't it? So if you know, looking at these boards that have been used in the panels, can you tell us a little bit more about the choices made around those, and was there any difficulties with kind of choosing this form of interpretation?
Well, I think it's a little bit different because I was very keen to keep it as natural as possible, and I wanted to have all the like exposed timber. I didn't want to cover up the screws, which is not the usual way we approach exhibitions. We're trying to keep it as well smooth and slick as possible, but I think with this exhibition, that's not what surfing's about. It's about getting back to nature. It's about a lot of what the early surfers talk about is just using whatever materials we had to hand. So I felt it wouldn't have been appropriate to use something that was really slick and styled for surfing. You know,
this is more in keeping with it.
Yeah, I think it's more appropriate for the story and how it developed, and even with like our labels. We made these all in-house with a laser scanner, and again kind of lends itself to the look of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I see that there's one of the panels there, obviously surfing is continuing amidst kind of conflict and everything else that was going on in Northern Ireland at various times.
Well, yeah, it was something that obviously is such a big part of recent history in Northern Ireland, so I felt it was important to ask the interviewees if that had had any impact on them. But I think what came out of it was that most of them said that there was no issues about that. With a lot of the surfing that they did was in the Republic of Ireland, and there were issues with border checks, but in general, like, there was no
division or things like that between the surfers based on those sort of lines. It was very much a community in itself.
Yeah, very much so. That they said that there was never any discussion about what religion you were. That never came into it because they were all there for the same thing. They all were there for the love of surfing. And
it's always been like an all Ireland thing then.
There was no divide when it came to the surfing community. They just saw an opportunity to have a good surf in the waves, and that was all that mattered. For a lot of them talk about the Northern Irish surfers being able to have that bit of escape to get away from what was happening in Northern Ireland at the time, and you got across the border, and then once you were down at the beach and in the waves, you're kind of free. And I think that comes up quite a few times. It's not just during the period of Troubles, but I think that's what people feel is a freedom whenever they're out on the water. Like asking surfers, what's it like surfing a wave, and a lot of them are thinking you just can't describe it. It's more of a feeling, it's more of an emotion, and but that Bea Greenberg, who's one of our sort of younger surfers, she's been all Ireland champion as well. She described it really well. She said, you know, whenever you surf a wave, no one's ever going to surf that wave again. And when you think about it, that's totally right. You know, that wave will never happen again. No one else will ever surf that wave that you're surfing. And I just thought that was a really good way of describing it, and how special and unique it is whenever you surf a wave.
So Claire, can you tell me a wee bit more about the boards that are around the exhibition? Because they're obviously fun. I think they're quite important in surfing, aren't they, the boards?
Yeah, they're kind of essential. So we didn't actually have any surfboards in the collection. So everything that's in this exhibition was purchased specifically for this exhibition. The 3 boards that are on the walls were all made by local shapers specifically for the exhibition. This one here is the Funky Fungi, which was made by Sweetboards. Surfing, what else is there? That's what it stands for. The shaper Stephen Devlin made this for us, and we actually filmed him at different stages showing how a surfboard actually is made. And then we actually filmed him surfing it, which is why you can see this looks a wee bit dirty in comparison. So he's actually, that's wax that he's put on, and then he actually surfed it. But
and wax is presumably just for grip, yeah?
Yes, so yeah, surfers need the wax for grip, and then, but we kept that as, you know,
historic.
Yeah, it's very
dirt.
authentic.
Yes,
authentic
I like it.
surfing wax.
Okay.
Show the experience.
Yeah. And then this one down here is a wee bit more shiny looking.
Yes, so none of the others were surfed, so they're looking a bit cleaner. So this was made by Sander Van Eck, who his company's called Cloyfin. Oh, sorry, this is the Cloyfin Cruiser, and then his company's VE Design. So he made this specially, and he asked me if did I want any particular design for it, and I was just like, no, go nuts. See, what do you fancy? And that's what Sander came up with. It's a really nice board. And again, this sort of like, we just had them strapped in like this, so it's not a really fancy mount or anything. It's basically, this is what people would use to strap them to their cars. So
was there any unexpected challenges, you know, from a museum perspective of figuring out, I mean, the boards are quite heavy, but obviously one person can carry them presumably to be able to get to the sea, so there was no problems with kind of mounting that or anything?
No, we worked with a local mount maker who we use quite often in the museum, Anna Barclay, and sometimes we've given her quite the task to come up with some of the more challenging objects, which, as you might know, Rebecca, from some of your collection.
Might be me.
Yeah.
Binlid.
So I think I hope she quite enjoyed the challenge of this exhibition of coming up with something that looked a bit more industrial, and I thought she did a great job with the straps and how they're, so it's not just the straps, but they'll have mounts at the back as well, just to make sure that they're secure and they're safe. Yeah, sometimes new objects like this, which we haven't really had in the collection, can present new challenges. But Anna was more than up to the task, thank goodness. So this would be the largest surfboard that we have on display in the exhibition. It's known as a gum board, which they're used specifically for big wave surfing. And this is a replica of one that Al Menny used on the west coast of Ireland. It was made by Rosie Surfboards. So we approached Rosie and asked if he would make another one for us for the exhibition. And so it's quite big, as you can see. It's like 11.3.
Did you raise the ceiling in order to put the surfboard in?
Thankfully we were able to, as you can see, the ceiling is lower at this point, but we have enough room on this side of the exhibition, thank goodness, so we were able to squeeze it in because it was quite a bit bigger than the other boards.
And of course you're standing behind a very lovely little car. Can you tell us a wee bit more about that?
So this is the Morris Minor Traveller. We actually already had it in the collection. It was on display in our Rogue Gallery. It's 1970, but it's a classic surfmobile, really. And I think people maybe weren't appreciating it in its old location because it was with lots of other cars, and I really wanted to showcase it and sort of connect it to its surfing heritage. So it just fits in so well, and it means it gets its own spotlight now. So I was really pleased that we were able to get that into the collection.
It's nice as well because I think it captures a lot of the kind of what it was like for those early surfers kind of travelling around Ireland and learning more and more about this new sport, or do you call it sport?
Yeah. I mean, it was a bit of trial and error, particularly at the beginning, and you can see that with how they're making their own boards and how they made their own wetsuits, and it was just, as long as they got out in the waves, it didn't matter how they did it. So they're probably a lot tougher than maybe what we are today. They would go out in no wetsuits in that cold water, but yeah, all that mattered was catching the waves, and they would just throw everything into whatever vehicle that they could get their hands on in order to be able to get to those waves. So
and you can tell there's like this wee kind of community and a culture built up amongst that community of how they kind of including even the language that they use when they're talking to each other. Can you teach us how to talk surfer?
Well, I have to sort of teach myself sometimes, but yeah, then obviously with surfing, it became sort of had a revival in the 1960s in California and then Australia, and although its heritage, its origins go much further back, but obviously what's come out of that is this sort of surfing language, this slang, and that's something that you might hear in videos and movies and things like that, and maybe not actually know what that means. So for some people who aren't familiar with the surfing slang, I thought maybe it would be good to put something up like this just to teach people a little bit more about the culture. And you can also find out if you're a goofy footer or a regular stance, depending on how you stand on the board.
Which one are you, Claire?
I am regular stance. Not that that's helped me in my surfing abilities, I have to say, but yeah, I think it's trying to engage people more directly with surfing, even if you've never been on a surfboard in your life. You know, you can hear from other surfers about what it's like. You can talk the slang. You can have a go at what it would be like if you're on a surfboard yourself. So yeah, it's all these ways that means that you can engage with the community and with the sport and find out more about it in a fun way. And yeah, probably one of the best ones is the shaka at the bottom, which is the hand gesture that a lot of surfers do to each other. So it's just a really good way of saying that's really good, or hi, or see you later. And yeah, as it says here, positive emotions like happiness and excitement. And I think that is a really important part of the culture of surfing. So yeah, everybody will be doing shakas from now on. Thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed the Celtic Wave series on the history of surfing in Ireland. Please like and subscribe for more content from the Ulster Transport Museum.